Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the annual kickoff press conference of the ESA Director General here from ESA headquarters in Paris, today in online mode. My name is Bernhard von Weihe from the ESA Media Relations team. A very warm welcome to the journalists. We have over 100 journalists and colleagues from communications in the industry registered this morning. Please be aware that a replay file available afterwards, and also the presentation that the Director General will hold afterwards will be made available to the journalists in PDF format. Journalists are a priori registered via the WebEx interface, and you also have the possibility to follow outside in passive mode via ESA Web TV. On that side, you cannot ask questions though. So welcome also to the extensive audiences that follow us outside on ESA Web TV. And now I would like to hand over to the ESA Director General, Josef Aschbacher. Josef, the floor is yours, please.
So thank you, Bernhard, and welcome also from my side. And really thank you for joining at this annual press conference. It's always a special occasion for ESA, and I really would like to take the opportunity first to thank all the journalists, all of you, for a lot of very good work you have been doing over the last year, and obviously you will continue this year, but we really appreciate your work, your effort, your dedication. You are a very important voice for us to communicate activities into the population, into the people, into the countries, and this is really very much appreciated. So very, very warm thank you from my side. Today I'm joined also by my directors, most of them online connected. In the room there is only a very few, and I will have also a surprise guest who will join me towards the end of my presentation. I'm not revealing the name yet, but you will see at the end of the presentation also to give a very special angle on some of the aspects I'm talking about. So let me go a bit into the activities that are planned for this year. But before I do so, just to recall very quickly in 1 minute of what happened last year. As you know, on the 1st of March, I joined as the DG of ESA. We put a new ambition on the table called Agenda 2025. You have all been reporting about it very positively, and thank you once more for that. But this really triggered a number of actions. And one of the first milestones in which we engaged was to negotiate very quickly, in rapid time, I would say, the FFPA, the Financial Framework Partnership Agreement. As you know, it was signed in June last year, which will bring to ESA more than 9 billion for the implementation of Copernicus and Galileo, plus some other activities on behalf of the European Union and the European Commission. Certainly a very important milestone. Then we, in parallel, invited wise people, we call it a wise people group, to advise us, to advise me on how we can best transform the Agenda 2025 into concrete action. And this was a very intensive process, 9 people, most of them previous ministers, some previous DGs of Commission and ESA, and some other people from private business. And this was very important because the recommendations in the report of these wise people was recommending to focus on the needs of society and of people. And the result, as you know, was a recommendation to engage in accelerators and inspirators. And this is something where I also would like to focus today. This report was translated into a political document called the Matosinhos Manifesto, which was adopted by the member states of ESA at ministerial level on the 19th of November, and gave a very strong mandate to ESA and to me as DG of ESA to really work on the development of the accelerators and inspirators, but also on the evolution of ESA, what this means for space in Europe. And this is something that we will focus this year. There will be some milestones coming up. Then, of course, we have the Space Summit ahead of us, 16th of February, as you know, and I will speak about this in a moment. Maybe as a last comment on, in line with the Agenda 25 activities, there was a very important agreement which I signed with Italy just before Christmas, which was which is certainly an important milestone because ESA was asked by the Italian government to help them to assist a member state to implement important activities for them, in this case focused on Earth observation and space transportation, which is very substantial and eventually might become a building block of the future accelerators, which I'm talking about. So let me now go into the situation of this year and what ESA looks like in 2022. The next slide shows our budget, which we have available. We have 7.152 billion this year. This is about 10% more than last year. And you see here the breakdown of the various activities. The bigger parts are Earth observation, space transportation, navigation, human and robotic exploration, space science, and a number of activities listed here. But also on the top right, you see that about 2/3 of this budget comes from ESA member states, to be correct, 64.3%, and 28%, a bit more than 28% from the European Union. And this also shows that the European Union is more and more a key partner of ESA, and we work hand in hand with the European Commission and the European Union in implementing some of the space programs. Of course, also EUMETSAT and other partners to mention. So about 1/3 of our income comes from third-party partners, and 2/3 from our member states. The next slide shows the accelerators and inspirators where we go. And as I said, the acceleration really has started because we are having a number of actions and activities put on track. Of course, we are still very far away from the final goal and objectives which they will build up and which they will reach. But certainly, we have made extremely important progress in order to get there. And the next slide does recall these three accelerators and two inspirators, as you know them already. Just recall them very briefly. Space for a Green Future, Rapid and Resilient Crisis Response, Protection of European Space Assets as the three accelerators, and two inspirators, one on the icy moon, an icy moon sample return mission, and one on European human exploration. Let me go into these topics a bit more one by one. As you will see in the presentation, this is not only showing the accelerators and inspirators, but really the activities in those domains. So please just be reassured that what you see here is not all already part of the accelerators because they have yet to be defined, but certainly in this domain and might become future building blocks. The first accelerator, on the next slide, is on the green future. You have already seen that, but it is a very, very important one because it addresses political priorities which we have in Europe, which are on everyone's mind. And this is something that we have really to engage our space means in order to help tackling the problems we have. And these are related to climate change and all the aspects that go with it. What you see here are some first elements of what are the elements that will be done and performed within the Space for a Green Future Accelerator. On one side, you have hardware. Here you see a quantum mission for climate, which is a quantum interferometry mission that we are planning with, which would allow, with very high precision, to retrieve the gravimetry field or mass changes on our planet. The accuracy of such a mission using cold atom interferometry will be by many factors higher than today's gravimetry mission allow us to do. And this, of course, is important for climate change, but also other applications. Obviously, this is research and technology development, but certainly would be a big step in terms of technological advancements which we would take. Digital Twin Earth in the center is really at the core of what we need to do in order to help accelerating the decarbonization of our planet. And of course, we look at Europe as a focus point. What do we do with the digital twin? You have heard me speaking about this. We combine Earth observation data from our satellites with the measurements on ground in the air and in the oceans, in situ measurements, linked with Earth system models. And we predict, of course, using high-performance computing, we predict the future. That means we simulate our planet on a computer. That may sound fascinating. It's a big challenge, as you can imagine. It will take some time in order to set it up, but really to allow us to have these what-if scenarios. What happens if I change one parameter, or what happens if another parameter changes to our climate, but not only our climate, also the people that are affected by it. Deforestation, sea level rise, change of agriculture, change of energy means, coal power plants being switched off, say, 5 or 10 years earlier. What does it mean for people? What does it mean for the climate? What does it mean for various elements towards decarbonization? Of course, we need then many products that are being delivered. And you see on the right-hand side, the green transition information factories that need to be established in order to really deliver day-to-day products for traffic, for farmers, for fishermen, really for all kind of people that are involved in the decarbonization effort. But of course, the big goal is to help the decarbonization of Europe, to create a more sustainable planet, and to meet the objectives of 2050 to be climate neutral, which most countries have declared as a primary goal. And there will be a lot of work necessary. In fact, I should say that we had for all 3 accelerators last week on Thursday and Friday workshops where we invited key stakeholders, users, which are defining and helping us defining what these accelerators should be doing and where we should be focusing. And these user workshops, we're just writing up the report, but they have been very successful. Not only did they confirm the urgency to act and the importance of the accelerators, but really gave us a very good guidance on how to implement them and what has to be done. The next slide shows that, of course, in the domain of the Green Future Accelerator, Copernicus is a building block and is a very successful global success on providing data routinely today. As you perfectly know, we are implementing this with and for the European Commission. There's ESA co-funding involved, but the lead certainly is with the European Commission as our strong partner in this program. And it's a very successful program. Some people call it a gold standard in Earth observation, and in fact it is, because we do deliver and we do provide 300 terabytes of data every single day to the global community of data coming from the Copernicus program. And Europe, collectively, the European Commission, ESA, EUMETSAT, and several other partners across Europe are really put together the energies to deliver this data for people, but at the end for all humanity on our planet. However, we have also problems to tackle. And you see on the right-hand side, the 750 million, that is still an unresolved issue. We are working very closely with the Commission to solve it. I hope in the next couple of weeks. I would not like to preempt a decision that has yet to be made. But after the deadline of 30 November was passed last year, we have been obliged, according to the agreements with our member states and with the Commission, to now really in coordination with the member states to define the way forward. And that's what we are doing. We have several meetings planned, and I'm hopeful that hopefully, certainly before the summit, we will reach an agreement on a clear way forward. On a clear way forward. There's another issue, and I would like also to mention it, which is Sentinel-1B. Some of you have seen and heard that Sentinel-1B today has a technical problem. And this is an issue we have to resolve. We are not yet fully aware of what exactly the problem is. It's a power supply unit of the antenna system. It failed. We have tried several actions to reanimate and recover, but we are still working on it from a technical point of view. On one side, it shows how essential Sentinel-1B is, or the Sentinels altogether, because users are really coming to us now and ask us to find solutions. Of course, on one side, Sentinel-1A is the good news, is working extremely well beyond its nominal lifetime, which is nominally 7 years. But on the other side, we have Sentinel-1C and 1D in the waiting, in the production. And of course, we are now looking into launching them as soon as we can. Of course, given the fact that the flight acceptance review of Sentinel-1C is planned for October, and obviously we need a launch slot which needs to be arranged. The next slide shows another aspect of Earth observation, the launch of MTG, which is a highlight of this year. MTG will be the first of the next generation of satellites, of the third generation of satellites that is being launched. There are four imagers and 2 sounders that are being launched in the next couple of years. And MTG I-1, as it is called, will be the first one to be launched before the end of the year. In meteorology, about 61 billion economic benefit are calculated every year for Europe as the result of weather forecasts. So 61 billion euros are the benefits of good weather forecast as we obtain it with satellites and, of course, models and other information. 95% of the data for the weather forecasting, for numerical weather prediction models, come from satellites. So you see how essential satellites are for people, for society, and for the functioning of our economy. And MDG will be the next milestone, setting new standards of new performances of this satellite, which will be quite unique when it is being launched and provides data. Next slide. It's just a reminder that it's not only Copernicus and meteorology, which we do in ESA, but also a very strong Future Rio program, which has Earth explorers, scout missions, and of course, a very strong technology development and user segment and data dissemination segment, which, as you all know very well, is complementary and a very strong asset of the overall Earth observation program. This is absolutely necessary because the Future Rio is preparing the future of Earth observation through technology and user developments. And this is a very integrated system based on which, of course, Copernicus and others are benefiting. The next slide goes into the next accelerator, rapid and resilient crisis response. Again, much of those crises which we see are triggered by climate change. Floods, fires, storms are causing huge damages for our society, tens of billions for each event in Europe. The flooding in Central Europe last year, the forest fires in the southern parts of Europe last year, they caused tens of billions of damage for each single event. And there, of course, satellites and space cannot stop or stop these events, these disasters to come, but certainly we can help providing information quickly when needed. And this is what we want to do by setting up a system that is more responsive, that we get information quicker, more dynamic, but even, I would say, more intelligently, because we would add intelligence into the satellite through artificial intelligence and what we call cloud-based computing, where we would really, through cognitive cloud-based computing, detect some of the elements that are come and immediately steer the satellites to the crisis as it happens, and also using inter-satellite links that provides a mesh and a grid of satellite observations. On one side, we need faster, more dynamic, and more observations, of course, at different resolutions. On the other side, we need a secure network, telecommunications network, to make this happen. And here comes really, and this is very beautiful, a hand-in-hand approach with the European Commission's Secure Connectivity Program, which is being built up, as you know, in parallel under the leadership of the European Union. And in our case, the Rapid and Resilient Crisis Response Accelerator will provide content and will use this secure connectivity network of the European Commission. And this brings me to the next slide. Just to underline that we are working very closely with the European Commission in providing some ESA elements to the overall secure connectivity initiative. It is defined clearly under the leadership of the European Commission. You see here some of the principles of this constellation that is being put together, but ESA is preparing with its member states and with the Commission an element that we want to contribute as an element of this future constellation, certainly focusing on technology development and making sure that we are making a leap in terms of technology developments in order to really build up a very strong, a very user-oriented system, obviously with commercial partners, as you see it also here in this slide. Focus will be Europe, Arctic, and Africa in terms of geography, but obviously it will be a global system which will provide services at different places. The next slide goes again to Telecom and Integrated Applications Directorate. We have also a number of satellite launches ahead of us. You see here 5 of them that are planned this year with Eutelsat, with OneWeb, Spire, different sizes and different innovation that are being tackled here, from CubeSats to larger satellites, really tackling different aspects of telecommunication as we are doing it with commercial partners to a large extent. The next slide shows Galileo. We had a very successful launch just before Christmas. We have 2 launches this year. You see here number 29, 30, and 31, 32 in March, April, and September and November from Kourou with Soyuz. And this will this will provide the full operational capability of the Galileo open service. So this will be a very important milestone that we reach this year. We have still 3 more launches foreseen between 23 and 25 on Ariane 6 to really build up the first generation completely and have more resilience through more spacecraft in orbit. Of course, as you also know, we are working towards the launch of the second generation of Galileo, which goes in parallel in, first of all, building up the first generation, but then preparing for the second generation, which will be a big leap in terms of technology and functionalities, which is to come. Next slide. Accelerator number 3, protecting our space assets. Space debris and space weather are key elements in protecting our assets. We have satellites in orbit, we have astronauts in orbit. Astronauts are my staff of ESA, and I have a duty to protect them. But also, obviously, satellites are an integral part of daily life. I've shown meteorology before, but in many domains, navigation, in Earth observation, in telecommunication, we depend on satellites. And this is something that is becoming more and more critical and more crucial in order to protect them. The next slide, in fact, shows a debate that has been happening a couple of weeks and months ago, which is what is the orbits, or who is using the orbits, who has the rights to use the orbits, and do we need more regulatory frameworks, more organization of the use of our space orbits? There has been some discussions in the Financial Times. You see here CNN with Elon Musk, with some other players. And I think the message really is that space is so important for our daily life that we need to preserve it, and we need to better regulate some of these aspects to protect our assets and our astronauts, and there we need to work on it. This is a political as well as a technical set of activities that need to take place, and certainly on our side we work on both, but the regulatory aspects, of course there are bodies and organizations responsible for that, but we have a need, and we certainly need to express this need. And on the technical side, obviously, we do different things from debris monitoring to developing technologies for removal of objects that are not in use anymore, in orbit servicing, and so on and so forth. So there's a long list of activities, and all this leads towards this accelerator on protecting our space assets. Then we go to the inspirational part. The next slide shows the Icy Moon sample return mission. You have seen this slide before, some of you, and here we come to a very, very exciting question that is, I think, keeping every single human on this planet busy. Everyone is asking him or herself, is there life out there? Is there other life outside our planet Earth? And that's a very fundamental question. There's many dimensions, from religions to philosophy, psychology. There are many elements that are related there. But what we want to do is something quite exciting, and this is at the core of this mission: to send a satellite out to a so-called icy moon, because the icy moons are those places which are believed to be within our solar system, the ones where certainly you should be looking searching for life outside, and there might be a chance of finding some kind of life. It may be very primitive. These icy moons have an ice cover, and there's water underneath. And there could be that there's very simple, primitive life in the water underneath or in the ice cover. And this is what astrobiologists are saying. If you want to look for life somewhere else, this is a place to go. So what the plan or the proposal would be, and of course it's very ambitious, is to send a satellite there with a lander. So first of all, fly there. There are several icy moon candidates which are on the top of this list. Enceladus is probably an obvious one we want to look at, which is a moon of Saturn. So we fly there. Of course, with today's means, it takes 10 years to get there. We need to develop some technologies to really make this possible. Then to land on the icy moon, to take a probe, that means drilling into the ice cover, take a probe of water or ice in a container, again, raise the mission up into space, fly back to Earth, down through the atmosphere, land, and then analyze the probe. And then you can imagine, if you analyze the probe, of course, this will be in a few decades, what you discover would be quite interesting. You may discover no life. That's also one answer. You may have been unlucky not to find it there. But if you discover some primitive life, of course, the first question is, does it have a DNA? Is the DNA the same as we have or different? And again, this answers, I think, some questions under. I think this is so fascinating that it doesn't only develop technology and inspiration, but also young people we would like to address and we'd like to engage in space. And I think this is a perfect way of also getting a next generation into space, into ESA, apart from all the achievements that we will reach. Next slide is a bit more closer to today's world, so not several decades away as the icy moon, of course, will be. Today, we have this year a big release of data from Gaia. Gaia has been having 2 data releases already and is producing, and this is quite surprising, I think, to many of you, today is producing 50% more science publications than Hubble. And Hubble is always quoted as the mission that is revealing secrets of the universe. Yes, it does, absolutely. And we are working very closely with our partners on Hubble. But Gaia actually today brings out even more publications, 1,500 publications on average per year based on Gaia data. And this year, we will have another big release of data from Gaia where we will offer views of 1 billion objects, among which are 150,000 asteroids. And you can imagine how much research and science will be produced there. And of course, James Webb Space Telescope on the left. This will reveal yet another dimension of our universe. You have seen it. It was launched on Christmas Day. It literally is a gift to humankind to understand and look back very close to the Big Bang, some 200 to 300 million years after the Big Bang, to understand the origins of our universe. And this is a fascinating mission by itself. But ESA is a very strong partner in this, as you know, not only by launching it accurately, and this has been a very, very big success for Europe. It's not only ESA, it is with our partners, CNES, obviously, from the Kourou launch base, Arianespace, Ariane Group, and many European partners. But ESA is the partner of the James Webb Space Telescope and has provided the launcher. And this has been quite huge because the precise injection of the James Webb Space Telescope into orbit will allow that there is enough fuel on board to operate the mission for probably 20 years. The nominal lifetime is 5 years, and certainly the precise orbit injection has helped in creating or in allowing enough fuel that at least from a fuel point of view, the James Webb Space Telescope can operate for a long period of time. And I think this is something where NASA has been very grateful to us for this very precise launch. Now let me go to the next one, and that's a big topic. That is human space exploration. And this is something that requires, of course, on one side, advancement on the technology point of view, but also, and this is equally important, if not more important, political courage and decisions. And this is something I'd like to address in a minute, where we stand in Europe and what we are doing and what's happening at the moment. But before I go into the more future elements of it, let's see what happens today or this year on the launcher sector. The next slide shows the current state of development of Vega C. We do expect a maiden flight in May, and we are on very good track to achieve that. And we are working with our partners on the Ariane 6 maiden flight. And you see that here I'm saying towards maiden flight, because today I'm not in a position to give you an exact maiden flight launch date. And this is because we have 2 very important technical milestones ahead of us. The first one is the hot firing test in Lamboltshausen, Germany. And the second one is the combined tests of the rocket and the ground system in Kourou, which starts in the 3rd quarter of this year. The hot firing test starts in February, and the combined tests in the 3rd quarter in April. And these, of course, are very important milestones for all of those working on the launcher business. Understand that this may trigger or may need some further work or not. And these, of course, are key milestones in order to really then afterwards define the maiden flight launch date. If everything goes according to plan, we launch this year. But as I say, these two milestones are critical, and only after having passed them, we can consolidate a maiden flight date for sure. The next slide goes a bit into the global context. So what you see here is from 2012 until 2021, the various number of institutional launches, not commercial, but institutional launches in China, the US, Russia, and Europe. And you see immediately the different curves, what they say. I don't need to explain them. Europe is the green one at the bottom, and the other ones, as you see also from other news, are the ones you see here. Obviously, is the very strong increase of China, but also very solid number of institutional launches by the US and by Russia, with some variations obviously over time. And Europe is somewhere in the 3 to 5 launches per year range. Of course, this is a very different starting point for Europe in human space exploration. You also see in the different bars at the bottom the various human-rated launches, human launches of the different countries. Of course, there is no green because Europe doesn't have this capability. Let's go to the next slide and talk about human exploration. You see here two of our astronauts who are, one of them is in the space station right now, Matthias, launched in November last year. He was following Thomas Pesquet, as you know, extremely successful mission as well, 6 months in space. Unfortunately, they didn't have an overlap because they're very good friends and they wanted to shake hands in orbit, but there were a few days gap in between. And then after Matthias after Matthias's stay in orbit, there will be a small overlap again planned with Samantha Cristoforetti. The launch date is not yet confirmed, but will be around the April timeframe. And again, she will then continue for a couple of months. Again, the duration is being negotiated right now. But this will give Europe almost a year and a half of almost uninterrupted presence on the space station. And that's the first time that we have such a strong presence there. And it's, I would almost call it a golden age of the exploitation of the International Space Station, because with these three astronauts, Thomas, Matthias, and Samantha, we are really having a huge amount of experiments which we are conducting, which really help us in many aspects to advance. But also, they give a very different view of our planet. And this is something that, of course, astronauts can describe much better than I do. On the other side, on the right-hand side, you see the astronaut selection process, which is ongoing. And you all have seen that we got 22,589 applications. We have now gone through some steps of selection, and we still have more than 1,300 candidates in the running. We will reduce this to about 400 starting in February, where the next phase of the selection process takes place. But by the end of the year, I hope that I will interview from a smaller pool of several tens of candidates, 4 to 6 astronauts that will become the future astronauts together with the current ones to be part of our astronaut corps. So this is a very exciting selection process. Of course, the very, very fascinating news is that we have 22,000 applications, which is enormous and really shows that space, I think, is getting a new renaissance in terms of attractiveness and really by young people that they want to be in space, which is fantastic. The next slide actually shows where they are now. This is the space station. Picture taken by Thomas Pesquet when he was waving goodbye to the station on his way back to Earth, taken with his own camera. And I think it also shows not only the personal touch, was, as you can imagine, an astronaut leaving his home of 6 months, what it means, but also shows the importance of the space station. As you know, NASA has decided that they want to extend the space station until 2030. And now the other members of the space station are making their decisions. On my side, I'm preparing a proposal for the ministerial conference in November to propose a European continuation of this as well. And I'm very confident and hopeful that my member states will positively decide, because it is really a unique opportunity which we have there. The next slide goes towards the future and further away from our planet. And this is going towards the moon. What you see here is the SLS, the which has a very important European service module as part of the future moon rocket of NASA. And this is something that makes us in Europe very proud. Through our contributions to NASA, the ESMs, we are part of the next moon mission. And you see these people looking up here to the rocket. At the center, there's a logo under the NASA logo. This is the ESA logo. And I think this also is very symbolic that this ESA logo means that Europe, together with NASA, obviously very clearly led by NASA, but Europe, together with NASA, is going to the moon. Of course, the first mission, as you know, is without astronauts, and the next one with astronauts. And let's go to the next slide, which shows, gives an impression of the European contribution, the ESM, as it will look like. Of course, this is a simulation, and the focus is on the ESM as our contribution to the Orion mission. Here you see a model as it is then flying towards the moon, powered by the European Service Module, which, as you know, which has been developed under the leadership of Bremen. And we have today committed, we are developing 6 of these ESMs in exchange for astronaut flights. Today, with our current planning, we are working on 3 more service modules which we would like to provide to NASA, again in exchange for astronaut flights also to the gateway itself. What is not yet agreed and is under negotiation is a European astronaut touching the moon surface, and this is part, of course, of other partner agreements which we are conducting with NASA, particularly related to the EL3, which is a very important aspect. So you see here in this simulation the ESM powering the Orion. You see the various technical elements, the thrusters that are burning for maneuvers that are necessary. You will see in a second the separation of the ESM from the Orion. As you know, this is the Orion, of course, will return to our planet, while the ESM will safely burn up in the atmosphere and therefore not leave any traces. So here you see the various steps and the elements, but I think this simulation gives you a very good impression of the European engagement, which is essential in the moon mission. We are part of the so-called critical path, as it is called in the space jargon, in order to make the NASA SLL Artemis 1 or SLS mission possible. The next slide then goes even further into the future, and not in the future, in the future, but also in the distance, which goes towards Mars. So what you see here is on the left-hand side in these 2 animations, the parachute which is opening. These are the tests that have been made at the end of last year, the 35-meter main parachute, in order to land the rover, Rosalind Franklin, which will be landing sometimes early next year. But the launch, of course, of ExoMars is planned for September this year. The windows are every 2 years, as you know, and we do need to meet this launch window. This is a cooperation with Roscosmos. It is going very well. You see here on the right-hand side some of the key milestones that have been met. There are still some elements that need to be made, but we are on good track with a small positive launch schedule margin in order to go for the launch from Baikonur in September this year, together, as I said, with Roscosmos. The next slide then goes a bit into the more longer-term plans which we have in exploration. You know the Terre Nove 2030 strategy, which has been proposed by the Directorate for Human and Robotic Exploration in December to our member states. And you see here the various elements of it. And if you go from the bottom towards the top, so on the bottom line, you see the ISS. So we are a core partner of the ISS, as you know, in this decade. And in the future, of course, we want to engage in the ISS or its follow-up in different ways. What this exactly is, of course, needs to be decided. The 2030 plus framework, of course, is not yet decided or financed. These are all elements of preparation, which we are doing with our member states and with our partners, NASA in particular. If you go to the middle row, this is the gateway. As you know, we are a critical partner on the gateway. We are providing not only DSM for Artemis, but also IHARP as another element, or Esprit, with two different units where Europe is substantially contributing to the Artemis program and the gateway. And in the future, obviously, we would like to have an astronaut on the moon, and we are preparing different elements in this direction, from robotic elements, also negotiating astronaut boots on the moon. And then on top, you see Mars, different elements of it. ExoMars, of course, the DGO is flying since 2016. Then the rover is being launched this year. Also Mars sample return, we work very closely with NASA. And again, in the future, of course, we will work towards humans to Mars. This is obviously in the very far future, but certainly we will take steps with different partners to engage in this direction and prepare various activities. Next slide shows a bit what is the reality and what are the capabilities that different countries have. What you saw on the previous slide was our plan. Of course, the elements on the right-hand side, that means in the next decade, have yet to be decided and yet to be discussed. But this is the reality today or in the near future. On the bottom again, if you start with Mars, you see that the US, Russia, China, and Europe are engaged on the robotic part of Mars or Mars sample return. And this is, I would say, where Europe is actually having concrete plans to go there. Then in the next level, the lunar orbits, you see here both human and robotic elements. You see very clearly the US is engaged everywhere, Russia in some segments, but Europe is engaged through the ESM and Orion, of course, in lunar orbit and the gateway. Then through EL3, we are, of course, engaged in the robotic exploration. Not yet on the human exploration. As I say, this is part of future negotiations. And on robotic elements, of course, in the orbit, we are also engaged with NASA. Then you go to the blue color, which is LEO, which is low Earth orbit. There we have, of course, our participation in the space station, but where we are not active is in cargo vehicles and crew vehicles. And this is something where you see a red cross here on ESA, which we don't have. And then on the top, when it comes to transportation, obviously we don't have human-rated capabilities, while the other countries have it. The next slide shows the situation a bit more detailed. I'm not going into these various missions, but just to highlight two things here. There is no European flag on this graph, which shows human-rated capability around Earth, and on the right-hand side, beyond Earth, that means towards Moon and eventually Mars. And you see, of course, the US, China, and Russia very strongly represented through different launchers, human-rated launchers. Some of them fly already, some of them are flying in the near future. But also the bottom left, quite interesting, India. With Gaganyaan, they will be able to fly astronauts into low Earth orbit very soon. And this is quite amazing. If you think of Europe's economic capability, which is comparable with the US and China, not exactly the same, but in the same order of magnitude. And they all, of course, have their own ship to discover the next frontier. That means the next economic zone, which is the moon and beyond. And Europe doesn't have such a ship. And this is quite amazing, knowing that Europe has been an explorer, a pioneer in the 15th century and beyond. And this exploration has brought to Europe, I would say, a very important status as a rich country, as a rich set of countries, as a rich continent, which has been defining history for several hundreds of years, thanks also to the exploration which Europe did in the 15th century and afterwards. Today, we can't do that because we don't have a ship and we need to go with somebody else. The next slide shows a bit the reason why. Because we don't have enough money. Very simple. If you compare here the investments or the funding available to NASA in the various exploration activities, this adds up to 12 billion American US dollars. On the right-hand side, for the same budget lines, you see the European investments through ESA, and you see here 735 million. This is, if you convert the currency, 7% of what NASA is spending in exploration. And I think this really explains a bit where we are. We are much, much, much lower in terms of financial allocations, and obviously with less money, you can do much less. I'm not going into the details of this slide because I think it speaks by its own. And now let me go to the next slide, which really means that this is a debate that is so important because I think this is going way beyond space and is not only something that is a space discussion. This is a political discussion that affects all elements of society. There are so many aspects that are related to space exploration. But before I go a bit to the more societal aspects, let me show the last slide of my presentation, which is what is ahead of us in terms of decision milestones and where this discussion will take place. I start on the left-hand side. I mentioned already Agenda 2025. I mentioned the advisory group of the wise people. I mentioned the Matosinhos Manifesto. We have the Space Summit on the 16th of February, and this will be a very important milestone at political level. It's not a decision of budgets, but it's a political decision where member states of the EU and ESA meet and discuss what Europe should be doing in the future in space. Of course, in human exploration, this is one element, but also in the other ones. But certainly human exploration will be important, will be one important aspect. And this needs politicians. And I think this is the very important element I want to say. In order to see what politicians want us to do, then for ESA, to go back to our program-based business, which is our ministerial conference at the end of this year, where we will then obviously, based on the guidance given by politicians, develop various elements in our programs for member states to subscribe and then, of course, define all the various activities. I can tell you the package of the ministerial is going very well, the preparation of it. It's an ambitious one, but of course, we do need strong political support. And at this point of time, because this is going a bit beyond only space, this is a debate that needs different views in order to really launch this political debate. I would like to hand over to my friend and colleague who can give one particular view on human exploration, who is Thomas Pesquet. Thomas, over to you.
Thanks, Joseph. It's a pleasure to be here, really. It's a pleasure to be back from space. It's a pleasure to be back on Earth and be back at ESA HQ and see all the work that goes into preparing the future of space for Europe. We usually see it from a different perspective out there on the ground. It's good to be here as well. Space, by its own nature, is remote. It happens far away. It happens above our heads, and our hardware is not always visible. And for that, maybe sometimes people have a hard time to relate to space and what it does. We, as European astronauts, have a unique perspective in that we go out there and we see it with our own eyes. We have a front row seat to see the ISS in its environment, to see the European engineering, to see the technology, to see the science and the benefits. And I can tell you it's amazing. But we also have we're lucky enough to actually not only go to space, but come back, because we launch a lot of things into space, but not so much comes back. We're lucky enough to be one of those things that come back, and then we can actually meet the scientists. We go out there in the laboratories, we see the progress, we see the discoveries, and we talk to the kids, and we see the inspiration in their own eyes. So I can tell you this is for real. This is not just words. So armed with that knowledge, when that experience, that unique perspective, the group of European astronauts, following the invitation from the Director General, started to work and to help ESA develop a vision for shaping the future of space exploration. And we'll work closely with ESA and the Director General throughout 2022 and beyond. 25 years ago, decision makers were faced with a very difficult decision to engage Europe into the cooperation with the ISS program. We believe it was the right decision. We have in front of us today the results of that decision. Today, we're at the same crossroads for the future, for the next generation. We, as a group of European explorers, believe Europe should be bold in space exploration. we are ready to boldly go and explore for Europe if we're being given the mandate. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Josef Aschbacher and French ESA astronaut Thomas Pesquet. And now I would say we can go over to the Q&A session. And as a reminder, because some journalists were asking, and of course the presentation will be made available in PDF afterwards, and the entire session here is also recorded and will be available again on ESA Web TV and on the ESA web portal. Okay, are there any first questions coming up from the journalists, please? I think Pascal Hansens from Agence Europe had a question for you, Josef, concerning the Copernicus program. And what is the timeline in terms of discussions of the budget gap? And if you could please explain a little bit more, Josef, the issues you have with the Sentinel-1B. That's from Pascal Hansens from Agence Europe in Brussels. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pascal. First on the 750 million of Copernicus, what you all know is that the deadline of 30th November has passed, and we have not received, as originally expected, 750 million through the UK participation on the EU side of the Copernicus program. So now the situation is, what do we do and how do we proceed? And there have been several options that we debated quite intensely with our member states, with the Commission, on what we do and how do we live with 750 million less by keeping the integrity of the program. Of course, the big challenge, as you know, is to develop these 6 so-called expansion missions and not sacrificing 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 of them, because that would endanger the future continuation of Copernicus 2.0, and therefore the provision of crucial data for climate change and sustainability as all of us need them, and they have been very strongly demanded. So what are the next steps? We're having a task force running between the Commission and ESA in order to identify the options. We have consulted several times our member states. We've got very clear guidance what they want. To bring it, to make it short, what actually both the Commission and the member states want to see is a continuation of all 6 missions, so not to deleting 1 or 2 or 3 of them or more, but a continuation of it. But we need to see how we can do this in terms of engineering and implementation of the program. There are several options that allow us to buy a bit more time, and certainly one of them could be that we push the decision point into the future of when these 750 million would be needed. Of course, they are still needed. We are not solving it by pushing the decision point into the future. We still need to get the 750 million covered. But we can, and this is something where we work with industry at the moment very closely to see that we can push this decision points toward the CDR, the critical design review of the satellites. Of course, this needs, I would say, a bit of change and strong cooperation on the side of industry. But I think we all have strong interest in Europe. I can assure you that that we're working very strongly in this direction, and personally, I hope really that we can find a good solution. Sentinel-1B. So what happened on the 23rd of December? The so-called CASP, the C-band antenna CAPS power supply failed, and of course, immediately we look into the technical assets. We try to activate this power supply. We do not know today the root cause of it. We are still making several investigations. So it failed, and also the redundant unit failed at the same time. So this is quite strange, and we are looking into the aspects what made it fail. Of course, the very first action we do in ESA is to have an inquiry board to see whether there is an impact also on Sentinel 1C, which is still on the ground, and Sentinel 1D, and whether any design change need to be applied. So this is ongoing, but we have yet to understand the root cause, and that's making it still work in progress. So we keep working on the satellite. Of course, we have done all kind of activation mechanisms from ground with different, I'm not going into details, but different steps that we undertook on the satellite. They have not been succeeding so far. We still keep trying. But in parallel, we, of course, look into the Sentinel 1C launch date. And we also look into compensating the loss of Sentinel 1B data through other data that we buy commercially, in particular from Canada, C-band data, but also from other L-band, X-band data from other radar satellites. The other part, the good news of this bad news is that Sentinel 1A works perfectly well. It was launched in 2014, as you know, has exceeded its nominal launch, nominal lifetime, and is performing flawlessly, nominally. So from that point of view, at least Sentinel 1A is providing data, but Sentinel 1B today, since the 23rd of December, not. We keep you updated as new elements come in, but at the moment we are still working on the various aspects.
Okay, thank you very much on Earth observation and Sentinel. We have a large range of questions coming up. Thank you very much for your very strong interest. I'm happy to hear that. Maybe we have one more on the European space programs part. There's a question from Thierry Dubois from Aviation Week on launchers and on Galileo, and afterwards we will go over again to the exploration, also astronautics. There are a couple of questions on astronautics. So if you want, Thierry, if you're inside the WebEx system, will you try to ask your question orally, please?
Yes, thank you, Bernard. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you well.
Excellent. Thank you for the opportunity. So Thierry Dubois from Aviation Week. I do have two questions for you, Josef. Thanks very much for the presentation. One on launchers. You have explained us why you cannot commit on a launch date for Ariane 6. So is the fact that the program schedule keeps slipping to the right a concern? And my second question would be on Galileo. When precisely do you expect full operational capability, and what does it mean for users? Thank you.
No, thank you for both questions. In fact, I do have my directors online as well, and I would like to hand over to them also. But just very quickly on the launcher, is it a concern? Of course, it's a concern. And maybe just to reassure you, actually, on the first day when I became DG, I started an inquiry into the maiden flight launch date of Ariane 6. It was a very intense exercise which we did. We implemented some very severe management steps in ESA with Ariane Group, Ariane Space, and CNES in order to tackle all the issues that we have in front of us. So we are tackling it top level and very intensely, this I can say. But I really would like also to give the opportunity for my directors to respond to some of the questions. So I would like to hand over first to Daniel, and then maybe on Galileo to Paul. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Joseph. Good morning to all. Just to underline a bit what we are having ahead of us. Joseph mentioned it. We have on the one side the hot firing test of a new upper stage on a new test bench in Lambertshausen, Germany, which is quite a technical milestone to go through, because what we aim at is really to qualify the full domain, the full flight domain of the new upper stage, and this will provide us crucial information. Second point are the combined tests. In fact, the central core of Ariane 6 arrived in French Guiana in the meantime, a lower stage and an upper stage. This will now be put together, the vehicle, the launch vehicle, with the ground facilities. What we will do de facto is to simulate, to mimic a campaign. We will ignite Vulcain 2.1 several times. And both of these technical milestones bear a certain level of risk in themselves. And this is why we came with this point that we have to go through these two major campaigns before announcing definitely the date. let's underline that we are really on the final path of the development of Ariane 6. This program was decided in 2014, was started in 2015, and now we are on the last final path towards the maiden flight, and we'll do everything to make it as soon as possible. Back to you, Josef.
Thank you, Daniel. And I'd like to hand over to Paul on Galileo, please.
Yes, good morning, everybody, also from my side. So on Galileo, there are a number of steps foreseen in the next 3 years. First of all is the full operational capability on the open service. Then there is the year after. So this is still foreseen this year. Next year is the interim operational capability of the PRS service, and the year after the full operational capability of the PRS service. Now, in essence, what these steps are availability, is the availability of satellites and ground segment at a sufficient level in terms of redundancy, in terms of robustness, that we can ensure service continuity. So this is, if you wish, an operational assessment of what infrastructure levels need to be in place in order to provide certain service guarantees. At the level of the users, let me for the moment stick to the open service. The users will normally not notice this because this is about redundancy in the system, about having sufficient extra satellites available, sufficient extra ground equipment available and in place. So the users don't know it, but it is an important element in the declaration of the commitment. And this commitment will not be done by ESA, as you know, but will be done by the European Commission together with the EU Space Program Agency in Prague. Now, so we deliver the technical parts of this, the technical infrastructure upon which they decide when they are ready with their commitments. Thanks, Josef.
Okay, now let's go over from the European Space Policy Programs and so on more to exploration. There was a question on ExoMars, several questions on ExoMars. For the journalists, you may have realized we have sent out a news release this morning with updates, a bit more background on the status of this exciting ExoMars mission. And there was a question now from Guillaume Langin from Ciel et Espace to DG, to everyone. Can the issue with the descent module electronics be declared completely solved on ExoMars, please?
Okay, thank you. I can give you the answer, but as I say, I would like to bring in really my directors, and I would hand over to David, please.
Thank you very much, Josef, and thank you, and good morning from my side. Yes, great question. So we're talking about something called the Russian TCACU. The name is not important, but the function of these electronics is vital for ExoMars. It controls the main braking engine for the final landing on the surface of the red planet. And it's one of the elements that caused the delay of the launch back in 2020. And the work has been continuing. The design, the unit was sent back to Russia, has been modified. So, but to answer the question, there are ongoing tests on the so-called qualification model of those electronics. There have been software changes on the European side to accommodate the electronics. And if the current tests in Russia are not satisfactory, the Russian side will implement a change to the electronics box. Hope that answers the question.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question on, that's maybe interesting too in terms of exploration and human exploration. We'll also come in a minute to the astronaut selection campaign. We're just preparing some info material in the background. Maybe can you say, Josef, what is your question on crewed launch capacities from Kourou? What's your opinion on that? That's been asked by Michael Büker from Germany.
Yes, of course, a very important question, and all in the context of the discussion the presentation I just made on human exploration. Yes, Kourou is our launch port, and Kourou is certainly the first candidate if we develop a European launch capability from where we launch. So the answer is very simple and very straightforward from my point of view.
Okay, further questions coming up from Zaitsev from Interfax, Russia. I would like to ask a question on possible participation of European astronauts in Roscosmos NASA's agreement on the mutual provision of seats on space flights on Russian Soyuz spacecraft, and whether this is a matter being discussed with NASA. From Interfax, Russia.
Okay, no, thank you. There I really need the help of David, and I think, David, you have much more details on this. I know that this is a very hotly debated point, but you have all the information that is required for this exchange of astronaut flights between Russia and the US.
Yes, thank you, Josef. The journalist is absolutely right that there is an operational wish of all of the ISS partners that astronauts might be launched on all of the different vehicles, and therefore NASA has been working, reached agreement that in the future there will be continue to be US side astronauts launched on Soyuz, and Russian cosmonauts launched on US commercial crew vehicles. Now, to answer the question, the European astronaut seats are secured via our cooperation with NASA, and so there is a possibility that European astronauts will be launched, continue to be launched on Soyuz from time to time. But at the moment, all of our current astronauts and the current planning will be launched on US commercial crew vehicles.
Okay, then we also had several questions of concern, of course, concerning the ongoing ESA astronaut selection campaign, and we have some preliminary results we would like to share now. I'll try to share this with my PC now, and I'll let the Director General comment on this graphic. Hold a minute.
No, thank you. So the graph that is coming up in a few seconds is quite interesting, actually, because as I mentioned earlier, we had an extremely high number of applications in the first round, 22,589, as you remember. And there we had a participation of share between female and male candidates of about 24% female candidates and 76% males. What you see now in this diagram coming up is after the selection rounds, which brings us to 1,362, as you see here. The share of females has gone up significantly to 39%. And this is quite remarkable. And this is something that is certainly, I would say, from my perspective, good news that we get a better balance between male and female candidates. Of course, quality is the #1 criteria, just to reassure you. There's no gender balance or gender quota, which is part of this selection process. On the right-hand side, you see the para-astronauts. As you also know that we had applications for para-astronauts, 287 applications. We have here down-selected it at the moment to 29. And again, here the share is not as strongly increased as for the astronaut selection, but it's also at 27.6% compared to 72.4% males. Again, this feasibility study is ongoing at the moment on the para-astronauts, and as I say, the selections certainly for the astronauts itself is by the end of this year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Josef. And there was another question which exceptionally did not come via the WebEx chat, but from our old friend Ralf Klostermann from Bild Zeitung, who's live on Bild TV right now following this press conference. Josef, he asked a somewhat delicate political question. With the tensions right now going on between Russia and Ukraine, international politics, what would ESA do if Russia decided to invade Ukraine? I mean, what's ESA's position on that? It's a little bit off topic, maybe a general remark on international diplomacy. Thank you. From Bild Zeitung, Ralf Klostermann.
Yeah. No, thank you, Mr. Klostermann. Of course, these are scenarios which nobody wants to see, and the geopolitical scene is very clear. But one thing I really would like to point out, and this is this has happened in the past decades. We want to separate cooperation in space from, I would say, the bigger political picture on the ground. For two reasons. First of all, in space, the engagements are lasting for decades. We are having the space station now 20 years in operation. Of course, the decisions were made 10 years earlier. So you see here we are spending several decades. And as you also know, the space station was actually the symbol of peace, despite the Cold War between the US and the USSR at that time. USSR at the time. The space station, I think, is the best symbol of really working together, because we rely on each other and we need each other, especially for big undertakings like the ones we are doing in the space station or other elements of space. The same applies to the launch of ExoMars. We are almost there technically for the launch in September, and I certainly believe that the political, I would say, what happens politically on the ground will still will not change any of the plans towards the launch and obviously the operation of our space corporations. I do honestly want to underline that in space we do need a long-term cooperation. We need all the forces of different space agencies worldwide, and certainly this is somehow, not saying completely decoupled, but certainly to be seen within a separate segment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Josef. There's another question now. Let's go to Denmark, to the Nordics. We don't have so many questions from the Nordics. It's Frederik Lune from Radio 4 Denmark asking. He watched ESA 2022 YouTube video, I guess the highlights video for the next year, and several goals where you, DG, also mentioned that in the astronaut class, the new one, there would be an astronaut with physical disabilities. What is the reasoning for it, and can we see more astronauts with physical disabilities coming in the future? From Radio in Denmark.
No, thank you. Very good point. And the para-astronaut campaign actually is unique worldwide, but it is also a symbol that we would like to show that space is not only for an elite class of I would say test pilots or other very specialized people. Of course, they're all highly qualified and have all the skills, as you have also just seen also from Thomas. But you also would like to see what are the whether we can have people with some physical limitations, and the number or the type of limitations is very clearly defined has been very clearly defined in our call. But yes, we would like to enable people with some disabilities to also be able to fly to space. And that's why we're really engaged in this. Of course, it needs special studies, feasibility studies. There may be some adjustments needed in space or on the way there. That means in the spacecraft, in order to make this happen. And that's exactly what we're doing right now, these feasibility studies to see what the implications would be. But yes, we are committed as ESA to open space to everyone.
Okay, thank you, Josef. There's another interesting question related to human spaceflight and European ambitions in that area from Véronique Guillemard, the business chief at Le Figaro. Her question: can you give an estimate of the budget necessary for Europe to acquire the capabilities it does not have, in particular for a manned capsule, or crewed capsule? Le Figaro business.
No, thank you. And of course, I understand that you asked the question, but forgive me that I can't give you the answer. It's not that I don't want to, but what I really want to achieve is a reflection on what is needed in order to get there. So what I do hope is that in the next couple of weeks and months, and certainly the Space Summit being a major milestone along this way, that we get a request from politicians to really go into depth and launch studies that allow us to give you this figure. I would expect this takes about a year to design and to develop different options and have a certain certainty of the figure which we are putting on the table. Today, I could only give a very speculative figure, which I don't want to do because this is not based on real studies. So we do need to go through these studies. As I say, in a year's time, we will be much better placed to give you precise estimates if we get the mandate from our political establishment to do so.
Okay, thank you. I hope this answers the question. Another one from Agence France Presse Science Service, Pierre Célérier. Can you confirm that there is an ongoing negotiation with NASA to secure a European on the moon by 2029 in exchange for the service of a logistics lunar lander? From Agence France Presse Science Service.
No, thank you, Pierre. I can confirm that these negotiations are ongoing. They're quite intense, actually. And I do hope that we do get some affirmation this year. I would hope in the before the summer time to know more details. I don't know, maybe David, you are on almost daily contact with NASA. Maybe you want to elaborate a bit further on this.
Yes, thank you, Josef. So just for everyone's benefit, when you saw one of the slides of DG showing the capabilities of Europe in exploration, one of the elements we hope to have by the end of this decade is lunar landing capability. ESA proposed a lunar lander 10 years ago. We are proposing something much more ambitious and more capable at this upcoming ESA ministerial. So it's called EL3, European Large Logistic Lander. And it's one of the elements we are in discussion with NASA about as additional European contributions to Artemis. We're also interested in providing lunar communications and navigation services. But EL3 is the possibility to land at least 1.5 tons of payload on the surface of the moon to put in place to support human exploration for big science, to maybe land lunar rovers and so on. And so this is, yes, a capability that NASA is interested in, and the discussions are ongoing. Hope to have a clearer position, well in time for the DG's presentation at the ministerial in November.
Yeah, maybe just one element to add what David was saying, of course, exactly along these lines. But I do hope to be able that the administrator of NASA, Bill Nelson, will be able to visit Europe, of course, pandemic and all the boundary conditions considering that he would be able to visit Europe and also speak to our ESA Council. And this is something I would be very pleased if he would accept this invitation.
Okay, now we have a direct question as well in the audio interface of WebEx or even video. Peter Deselding, can you intervene directly if you want with your question, please?
Yes, thanks very much. Josef, the first one only as a corrective. You were muted for about 40 seconds in your answer on the Copernicus issue, and I'm afraid the muted section was the meat of your answer. So let me just redirect that question to you on the assumption that it's not going to be put back into the recording that ESA is going to provide us. But on the Copernicus and the 750 million euros, you said you wanted to extend any need to make a decision to let the EU and the UK work their problems out up to CDR. I presume that means mid-2022, and that really beyond that, that would cause stresses on the system, and particularly the industrial contracts that would not be acceptable. So if you want to add that. Second question is, on slide 18, I believe there was a typo. It mentioned the combined tests for the Ariane 6 in the third quarter. I think, as Danielle said, just so people are clear, those things start in April, so the second quarter. And a last one for you on the Space Summit. As this was originally described, or maybe I misunderstood, that this is going to be a joint meeting of the EU Commission's Competitiveness Council and the European Space Agency's Council ministers. Since then, it's been separated into two separate meetings. Is that a big deal? And might that lessen the punch that this meeting has, or how should we read that? Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Apologies for the muting of the microphone, as you said, during the 750 million point, which is a very critical one. So just to confirm what you said is correct, that we want to find solutions to have the decision into the future, so pushing it into the future. CDR is expected around 2024. So we have a bit more time to we'll say find a solution. Of course, this will have implications, as you can imagine. We are negotiating right now with industry. We do, of course, want to contain any extra cost increases to the minimum or zero possible. The second point, of course, is as we go, of course, on some other parts of Copernicus, industrial contracts will need to be released and implemented, which might of course, reduce some of the attractiveness for the UK in particular. But we want a solution as soon as possible, but the latest possible date would be the CDR 2024. Then slide 18, yes, it should be Q2. Apologies if this is a typo. And then on your point on the Space Summit, yes, these are two meetings. they are 2 meetings in a row. Altogether, they form what I call the Space Summit, but they are actually 1 meeting of the Competitiveness Council of the European Union in its space configuration. And then we have a lunch with 2 inspiring or 2 very important topics to be raised, one on climate change and the other one on human exploration. And then after lunch, we have the ESA meeting at ministerial level. And this, the expectation is then all wrapped up at the end of the day by President Macron. So yes, this is the sequence of meetings, but it is clear the way we are setting up the agenda that they are interleaved, that they form one coherent package, and they depend on each other in terms of messages that are given. I would speak in the morning, and I expect the commissioners to speak in the afternoon. So this is really an integrated part where we treat different topics in 2 different meetings, that's correct. But in terms of thematics and the interlinkage which we plan, it's a very integrated meeting that is providing one big picture for Europe.
Maybe we have a good next question to contact Josef from, again, Pascal Hansens, Agence Europe, on the European Common Ambitions and the Space Summit you mentioned several times. It's in relation to the EU Constellation project on connectivity. Pascal Hansen says the European Commission is about to present the initiative. It's a question of a budget of 2 billion euros on the side of the EU, to be confirmed. But the project will cost about 6 billion euro in all. Does that mean that ESA is going to put money on the table, and at what level? So Connectivity EU.
Okay, thank you, Pascal. I will start, but I have Elodie in the room, and I will then ask her to continue. So as you say correctly, according to the planning of the Commission, the overall budget frame is 6 billion. As you know, this is 2 plus 2 plus 2 billions, 2 billions of which are from the public sector. And yes, ESA at the moment is preparing a proposal to provide one part of the public portion. Our working assumption today is around 750 million. But of course, all this needs to be negotiated with our member states and with the Commission. So this is all work in progress, but these are the big figures. But I would like to hand over really to Elodie. Again, she's in daily contact with Brussels on this. And maybe Elodie, you can elaborate a bit.
Yes, thank you, Joseph. And we are working hand-to-hand with the European Commission to also, there is a first initiation phase where there is study phase ongoing. It is a project that is involving very strongly the private actor and the private industry. So we are really working towards establishing the structure and the goals of this project. We are, as a role as ESA, we are there to support the European Commission ambition and the innovation and to boost the competitiveness of our European industry. So based upon our proposals that we will bring forward to the ministerial in November 2022, and based upon the mandate that will be given by our member state, we will then in 2023 go further in this initiative if this is accepted and proposed by your member state to actually indeed support financially this ambition with the European Commission.
Okay, thank you, Elodie Villot. There's an interesting next question from Italy, I guess. Andrea Bettini. There are growing safety issues with private mega constellations. How should we try them to be managed, and what are the first rules that should be introduced? From Andrea Bettini, I think from Italy.
No, thank you. Yes, this is a big question, and you have seen several publications and statements in different news outlets. It's a real concern of me, I have to say, that we are depending more and more on space assets. I mentioned it before, for all kinds of things. I mean, just imagine for a moment that you switch off all the satellites for a single day. This would be a complete disaster from many perspectives. So we do need to be sure that our assets are safe in space. In ESA, we are pursuing several activities and working on several fronts. As I mentioned before, one, of course, is to raise the awareness that the orbits are limited, that this needs to be regulated, and rules need to be put in place. Today, we are getting the information from the US. It's a very strong cooperation which we have from the US in terms of possible collisions that may come into our spacecraft. We are having regular collision avoidance maneuvers, which we are flying much more today than than a few years ago. One example, which was also quoted widely in the press, was AELOS, one of our ESA satellites, which was on a collision course with a Starlink satellite. Of course, you can imagine that on one side you have a mission that is highly relevant for weather forecasting in this case, and contributes significantly to better weather forecasts. And we need to do everything to protect these assets, leave alone the financial investments that have been made. Just recently also, we had when we launched the James Webb Space Telescope, we had a half-an-hour window, as you have probably followed through the news. But within this half-hour window, there were a couple of minutes that we would not have been allowed or able to launch because, of course, we would needed to avoid a possible intersection with a Starlink satellite as well. So yes, this is becoming more and more an issue. So yes, we do need to have good information and the traffic management system, basically, in where Europe gets this information. The second point is, and this really has to do with sustainability in orbit. And this has several aspects. One is to remove satellites, deactivated satellites from orbit. We have a program in the planning called ADRIOS, as you know, which does remove space junk. That means one element, in this case, it's an upper stage of a Vega launcher, to take them out of orbit. The other policy which we adopt in Europe is that we want, by 2030, for each satellite which we bring into orbit, take one out. That means that the satellites will be equipped with a mechanism to deorbit safely at the end of its life, to make sure that we are not adding more and more spacecraft into orbit. And then, of course, you have other elements related to in-orbit servicing, which becomes, in my opinion, more and more a challenge, and certainly something we also would like to invest. So there are several elements that are necessary, but of course, this also needs regulatory aspects between those nations and operators of spacecraft, and this is a dialogue which I think is happening right now, and I'm very happy that this has come up and is coming up, because for me, this needs to be urgently addressed, because orbits become more and more populated with satellites, which is all good news in its own right. But of course, we need to deal with it, just like you deal with traffic management on the road or traffic management in airspace. And yes, in outer space, we need the same.
Okay, thank you, Josef. Another policy-related question from Jeff Faust from Space News. It combines well with similar questions that have been asked about this next month's Space Summit. Overall, as we heard about Earth observation, connectivity, and so on, but also, well, I read the full question. It's what would you consider the successful outcome regarding declarations or commitments on human spaceflight and other priorities from next month's Space Summit? Jeff Faust, Space News.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. What would I expect a successful outcome? That the various initiatives that are put on the table for discussion and deliberation by ministers, and at the end by a statement of Mr. Macron, are receiving political endorsement. So what are these elements that are on the table? There is space traffic management, secure connectivity, which is proposed on the side of the EU context. Then there is the accelerators and inspirators, which ESA is raising and will be presenting. So all the three accelerators on green future, on crisis response, and protecting our assets, as well as the inspirators on the icy moon and the human exploration. So I would hope that we get a political endorsement. This is slightly different, of course, for each of these activities, because they all have their own programmatic framework. But certainly, I think you are hinting more on the human exploration one. On human exploration, I would certainly hope to get a very good debate by the political establishment in Europe, hopefully a mandate that we have to work on this to make concrete proposals, which probably takes a year's time or so, and then come back to decision makers with options, which we can elaborate, and then for final decisions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Josef. Indeed, that question was also asked by Marie-Ange Sanguy. She also mentioned that for 2 weeks, Stéphane Israël from Ariane Espace has been talking about independent human transportation capacities in Europe, as well as Philippe Baptiste, the CNES president. You want to react on this as well? From their side, they're wondering, again, I mean, you elaborated, but they're wondering, I mean, how strong is really our ambition, our desire to go into that direction or not?
No, thank you. Of course, we work very close with all our member states, CNES being our member on the ESA board, but also I should mention that all the other countries, among the bigger ones, of course, Germany, Italy, UK, and others are important, but all 22 of us, plus our associate members, I would like to get them on board on this debate. So this is certainly very important. Also, of course, Stéphane Israël more on the launcher side, but let me underline that we are not only talking of launchers, we are talking of human exploration. And as I've said before and shown in the slides, this is a much wider dimension, because there we are exploring a future new economic and life zone, which is, of course, Leo and eventually the moon and beyond. And for me, this is really more comparable to discovering a new continent. So we are not talking only of the ship, but we are talking of the continent itself, which we are discovering and working here. So please do not focus only on the launcher part, important part, of course, but on the overall aspect of exploration.
Okay, thank you, Josef. Now we have another question, a bit more global, I think, from Jonathan Amos from BBC Science. Jonathan, are you in the loop? Do you want to ask your question, apparently on behalf of several journalists?
Yeah, Bernard, I hope you can hear me okay, yeah?
Yes, very well.
Good, excellent. Joseph, I have a request for the ministerial meeting later in the year. There's a small group of us who regularly attend that meeting. It is somewhat difficult for journalists to cover that meeting. And I have a list of things that I think that we need. We need a shopping list from every director with a price list attached. You yourself, Joseph, have been very good at this in the past, but we need it from every director. We need revision documents regularly updated through the meeting so that we can see how the meeting is progressing. I think that's very important. And also we need to somehow address the business of how journalists engage with delegates to that meeting. In the past, it's as if we're foxes circling the hen coop and there is a fence between us. And that makes it very, very difficult for us to get the message out about how European taxpayers' money, billions of euros, is going to be spent. You talk a lot about Agenda 2025. I think for journalists, part of that would mean greater transparency. If you look at ESA, we should be regularly posting on the ESA website documents, meetings, lists of meetings, when they're occurring, who has attended. We need to work harder at making European institutions more open, more transparent, so that taxpayers can see where their money is going. As you know, I live in the United Kingdom. I'm no longer a European citizen. And one of the reasons for that is because British citizens did not understand fully how certain European institutions worked. So I make an appeal to you to work on transparency within the European Space Agency.
No, thank you, Jonathan. And I'm really happy that you say that. Really happy. You know me that I am quite open, and I'm always, for me, what you say very much is in line what I want to do. I think we are obliged to inform the public. I have also to say that you have been extremely supportive, and the more we can give you information, the more it helps you in writing the stories that you need to write. So from my side, I certainly will immediately make a proposal to my member states. Of course, at the end of the day, we have to make sure that this is positively received by my stakeholders. But I really take the message is very clear, and will certainly look into the various aspects you mentioned. The shopping list, please send it to me. The revision documents, the journalists' access to people, that means ESA directors and and member states. Of course, the member states need to talk to them. But this is something I'm very happily taking on board. I cannot guarantee and promise that you get everything you want to have and to see, because some of it, of course, may need I would say a closer discussion. But you have certainly my commitment to be as transparent as I can be, and I will push in this direction. As you say, I've been doing this in the past, and I would like to do this for ESA, because I just as you say, I find this extremely important. One last comment. The UK is a member of ESA. Do not forget, you say you are not European. For me, you are European, and I would like you to be a very strong European. Thank you.
Okay, Jonathan, thank you very much for your question. I also see several other journalists, Josef, who clearly endorsed the remarks by Jonathan. People from Süddeutsche Zeitung and other specialized magazines. And you may have realized, if I may just add, from the comms point of view, we have added the regular debriefings from the council. That's a bit more, also expert press. Sometimes we have things which are very much in the expert press area. Sometimes it's not so interesting for the general public. But as you heard, there's a very strong commitment for the Director General to look into this deeply and take actions. Okay, we still have good questions on the panel here. We have Andrew Jones asking, if I may change the topic again, for lunar exploration. Andrew Jones asking, China and Russia have invited countries and agencies to join the International Lunar Research Station, ILRS program. Is ESA considering some level of involvement in this program, and what discussions have to take place? From Andrew Jones.
Thank you, Andrew. I confirm I have received the invitation letter, yes, and I confirm that we have started to raise the debate in the various fora, that is in particular the program board dealing with human and robotic exploration. But of course, this question may sound a bit more trivial than it is at the end of the day. There are two elements, as you perfectly understand, that are linked to it. One is a political one, it's very clear. And the second one is a technical one, or technical/financial one. The amount of resources which we have in order to engage on various domains. It is clear, I just want to make it crystal clear, that our first and prime partner is NASA. We work very well with them, a very trusted relationship, and NASA is, I think also NASA considers ESA as their #1 international partner, and this partnership is very strong and is very solid, and there is no reason to change this by any means, by any way. Of course, in parallel, we have also cooperations with many other countries and agencies, and this we will continue to do. It's very obvious. Whether we then fully engage or partially engage on activities on the ILRS, this is all a matter of elaboration. There are some nuances to it. We have a joint lunar activity with Russia, for example. We have some other activities, so they would also fall within the wider framework of it. So in a way, yes, we already are planning to be participating, but certainly at a much smaller scale than with NASA. But I would like really to also ask David to comment on this, please.
Thank you, Josef. Thanks for the question. Yes, we've been aware, talking to our Chinese colleagues about the International Lunar Research Station since 2019, if I remember well. The definition of it is not so clear to us right now. However, I can say that the delegations, the member states, authorized us to build a small scientific instrument for the Chang'e 6 sample return mission. This is a Swedish-led instrument, neutral ion instrument. So that is being funded by our program. But indeed, we are limited to everything we would like to do by the budget availability of the program. So we have to be very, very selective. But yes, we are going to contribute one instrument to Chang'e 6 mission.
Okay, thank you. I'm looking at the time now. Let's maybe take another 1 or 2 questions, but we did get a lot of questions, so that's a great sign of interest of the journalists. Again, we had over 90 journalists registered, and I heard we had over 440 people following the ESA Web TV stream outside. Oh, that's a pretty good score. I think that's a new record. Jonathan Amos has another question now, but a more straightforward or easier one, in the sense that he talks about Sentinel-1C and future Earth observation programs, which of course are very close to our hearts too. Jonathan asks, when could Sentinel-1C get into orbit, assuming no design changes are required following the Sentinel-1B anomaly?
No, thank you, Jonathan. I could give you the answer, as you can imagine, but I would also like to offer the opportunity to Simonetta to comment on it, the new director of Earth observation, as you know, as of the 1st of January. So Simonetta, I hand over to you, and maybe Daniel wants to comment on the launcher side.
Thank you, Joseph, and good morning to everybody. Jonathan, you asked about the earliest option. So for the moment, we're looking into the root cause of what happened to Sentinel-1B before we actually decide what to do with 1C. And assuming there are no design changes, in fact, required, the flight acceptance for 1C is planned in October 22. So from there on, we could be ready, but the current launch date is mid-23 for 1C. So we would look then at any opportunity for potentially launching earlier. We don't have an option yet, and I'll let also Daniel comment and complement on that one. But of course, we would need to try and look for options to launch the satellite as soon as possible if 1B terminates its own lifetime, as Joseph mentioned earlier.
Daniel, please.
Yes, thank you. On the launcher side, it's clear that we have, as mentioned, the maiden flight of Vega C planned in May, and from there onwards, we will have to adapt the manifest. We will exploit during a certain time Vega C and Vega. Such an urgent need has as a consequence that we will have to review the different contracts on the launch service is in place, and we will manage this as top priority. I see, as Simonetta said, an opportunity as of end 22 with some contractual investigations to be continued. So this gives you the timeline from when we are ready to enter into this.
Okay, thank you. I saw there was also a question from Peter de Selding on Ariane 6. I hope the answer that Daniel Neuenschwand has given the chat in writing is sufficient so far. Cannot go into all details yet, I guess, but you can also have maybe a one-on-one background discussion. I think there was still another question from Thierry Dubois on from Aviation Week on human space flight technology. I'll try to find this. Thierry, do you want to ask your question to David Parker on human exploration technologies, please?
Yes, thanks for the opportunity. Yes, so imagine a political decision is made to go ahead with carrying humans on European launchers. What would be the main technology challenges or the main technology developments the European industry would have to do?
Okay, thanks, Thierry, for the question, and maybe my colleague Daniel will also complement anything I say. So some of the key technologies are obviously in the life support for astronauts in space. Now we have that capability already through what we're doing on Columbus and we'll be doing on the Lunar Gateway. So that's fully doable by Europe. It already exists. But one of the key technologies is keeping safe our astronauts during the launch phase, and therefore a launch abort system in the case of something going wrong is absolutely a critical piece of technology that we've not needed up to now. We have previously demonstrated the technologies for re-entry. Some of you will remember the atmospheric re-entry demonstrator many years ago. And Daniel's team are developing the Space Rider vehicle now. So I've absolutely no doubt we can conquer the technologies for re-entry. So fundamentally, the message is Europe can do it. The question is whether we're given the direction and the impetus to do it, to respond to the very clear words from Thomas Pesquet earlier. But maybe, Daniel, you might have some other points.
Dave, I think basically you said it. We have a number of building blocks on the critical path is, of course, the crew escape system, as mentioned by Dave. We would have, of course, also to adapt the launch pad for such human exploitation. And the re-entry, we are working on the re-entry capacities on a number of technologies and demonstrators. So at the end of the day, it is linked directly to the ambition Europe's want to have and at which pace you are ready to develop it. But let's say we would start from solid ground with a number of heritage in the area of launchers, but of course also of cargo vehicles like ATV and others we developed in the past.
Okay, thank you for this. I see there's still questions coming up, but sorry, I'm looking at the time. We will have to close down the meeting very soon. Maybe a last one from Michael Büker, which is related. And Jonathan Amos, for your Earth observation question, maybe we can do this bilaterally with DG in a separate interview. So Michael Büker on human spaceflight. Are crewed Soyuz launches from Kourou a realistic short-term option? Michael Büker.
Okay, thank you.
Shall I take that, Daniel?
You can take it, David. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the answer is that theoretically one could launch a crewed Soyuz vehicle from Kourou, but the issue again is the launch abort question. The launch abort system for Soyuz is based on launching in Baikonur and landing in if something goes wrong on land. Whereas if something went wrong during the launch of a Soyuz crew vehicle from Kourou, you'd be trying to recover the crew from somewhere in the South Atlantic Ocean, and that generates a new set of challenges. So it's theoretically possible, but not very practical is the way of putting it.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's it. We are now coming to the conclusion of the press conference. Thank you very much. And maybe I'll give the word to Josef Aschbacher for a small wrap-up statement. Josef?
No, thank you. Thank you, first of all, for all the interest you have. And if you have further questions, please feel free to contact me or my directors. We are at your disposal. We are very interested in working closely with you, very transparently. I really like what Jonathan was saying before. I'm certainly aiming and striving to be transparent. I see this as a responsibility which we have, and I'm very happy for this statement to be made, and this is something I certainly will pick up. But we are at your disposal. We thank you in advance for the good work you will be doing this year, and there will be lots of interactions. We do need your help, just to be very clear. We have a very important ministerial ahead of us. It's an ambitious one. I've not spoken too much about the content and the details of it, but you have probably heard that we had a very important workshop before Christmas with our delegations where we have presented the whole package, and it was pretty well received, of course, always with caveats that final decisions are made on the day of decision. But overall, I think we are on good track. But it's a very good package with many aspects in all directions. And of course, we work throughout the year very intensely on the various aspects. And I would also be happy at some point of time to debrief you a bit more on details of that. Of course, once we get a bit more consolidated feedback also from the various partners. So from my side, we are at your disposal. Feel free to really engage with us. This is what we want, and that's what you're doing very well. And thank you very much once more for your time, your interest, and also for today's press conference. So thank you.
Okay, so also many thanks from my side, from the ESA communications teams for your numerous participations. Be reminded that the replay video file will be made available on the ESA web portal very soon, as well as the extensive PowerPoint presentation you've seen today by the Director General. Please get back to your usual media interfaces if you have more questions, or indeed if you want ad hoc interviews. That's it from ESA headquarters Paris. Thank you very much. Have a good day and a good start into the new year. Bye-bye.